Here we go.
Hello and welcome to Bounding Into Comics. My name is John Trent. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief at Bounding Into Comics. Today I got a story about the Lord of the Rings fan site, theonering.net, which has quickly spiraled into an outlet plugging woke identity politics and has even accused Tolkien of being woke, is now attacking the Lord of the Rings fans by implying they are racist. On top of this, after calling fans racist, they have the gall to describe themselves as a haven for fans who want open debate. You literally can't make this up. This is what happened, though. In an article written by a contributor named Earl entitled The Rings of Power and the Issue of Race, the website implies that the Lord of the Rings fans are racist due to their critical reaction to the casting of Sofia Nomventi as the Dwarven Princess Disa and Ismael Cruz Cordova's casting as Arondir. The article makes it very clear this attack on the Lord of the Rings fans is made in bad faith, as Earl writes. While most of the cast, such as Morfydd Clark's Galadriel, Owain Arthur's Prince Durin IV, and Robert Arameo's Elrond were generally enthusiastically well received, the reactions to the rest of the diverse cast was rather dismaying, shocking even, and even those might be understatements. This just simply isn't true. Numerous people have been highly critical of Galadriel's characterization as a commander of the Northern armies, as well as Elrond's depiction as an architect and politician. TheOneRing.com, not to be confused with TheOneRing.net, made it very clear they took issue with Galadriel, writing on Twitter, Galadriel is a commander of the Northern armies. Galadriel is hunting down the last remnants of their collaborators who claimed the life of her brother. Tolkien. Looking. Tell me when you find that part where Galadriel leads her armies into battle. Okay. They also took issue with the depiction of Elrond, tweeting, there's so much more, compressing the storyline into a few years rather than the centuries needed, adding new forbidden romances, the show's being run by J.J. Abrams acolytes, Elrond is a canny young architect and politician. So clearly they weren't just taking issue with depictions of Galadriel and Elrond, there's a whole assortment of things that they were taking issue in just that tweet. TheOneRing.com was not alone in criticizing Galadriel and Elrond. YouTuber Just Some Guy shared his thoughts in a recent video upload. He said, I don't recall Galadriel being described as angry or brash. Proud, yes. Clever, yes. But never angry, never brash. But that does sound familiar. Where have I heard this before? It's the generic personality given to every action girl. I bet you're going to deck her out in armor with a half-shaved head and braids. When discussing her being the commander of the Northern armies, the YouTuber said, so they're changing Galadriel's character, making her a commander of the Northern army. What army? She was never part of any army in the Second Age. For the first third of the Second Age, she'd passed over the Blue Mountains with Celeborn into what will eventually become the Shire, and went further east, wandering around there for 1,200 years before she comes back into what's left of Lindon after Beleriand's taken into the sea. Just Some Guy would also take issue with Elrond, noting Elrond is described as an architect and politician, not the healer and lore master aligned with Gil-galad like he actually was. The YouTuber also points to how Elrond is depicted too. Even then, Amazon couldn't get the aesthetic right because he doesn't even have long hair, which all the elves did, and neither does Elrond, who is now blonde, even though most of the Noldor have dark hair. Clearly, people were criticizing Elrond and Galadriel, so Earl's assertion that they weren't is not true. But Earl more than likely doesn't care because he's trying to use his own lie to cudgel the Lord of the Rings fans with the accusation of racism, which he makes abundantly clear in the second part of his sentence, where he wrote, the reactions to the rest of the diverse cast was rather dismaying, shocking even, and even those might be understatements. Earl then specifically claims the characters of Disa, Arondir, Bronwyn, and an unnamed Harfoot elder played by Lenny Henry, quote, received criticism for no other reason than simply being people of color. This is another lie. It's not that they cast people of color, it's the fact the characters don't match up to how Tolkien depicted them in his works. Just Some Guy explains in his criticism, the actors can be non-white, and if they can pass as European with or without makeup, they can play those characters. They just need to look the part. Casting non-white actors in a Middle-earth show is like casting white actors in a Black Panther movie. It makes no sense. He's 100% right there. Specifically referring to Arondir, Just Some Guy explained, this is supposed to be a Sylvan elf who are part of the Nandor, who are described as having dark hair and white or olive skin. Think Mediterranean. Yes, there are some people of that area who are dark-skinned. However, the mentioning of white skin implies Tolkien is talking about the lighter olive skin, not this. As for Disa, he says, Tolkien never describes the dwarves as anything remotely African, nor does it make sense that they would look that way since they all live underground, meaning out of the sunlight. They would never get this dark. He goes on to point out she doesn't have a beard. He asks, so where's her beard? Did she eat it up with the rest of the Doritos? He's referring to her triangle-shaped jewelry as Doritos. He goes on to say, oh, don't act like nobody noticed all the gold on her fingers. She's either eaten her jewelry or doing a sexual act to Smaug. Y'all so obsessed with representation that you miss the perfect chance to have a bearded woman. Clearly, there is criticism because the characters don't line up with how Tolkien described them, and it's not just that they are, quote, people of color, as Earl claims. Nevertheless, Earl takes his implications and outright accuses fans of racism, writing, the avalanche of unveiled, blatant, shameless racism that hit our social platforms like a massive wave last week shook me. Anyone who uses the phrase shook me, you can just dismiss their opinion on its face because they're not a serious person. But Earl doesn't stop there. Like clockwork, Earl cites the fake Tolkien scholar who is actually a feminist activist and, quote, the Equality and Diversity Officer for the University of Glasgow's Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic, mentioned in the Vanity Fair article in another attempt to bludgeon his accusation of racism home. Her name is Mariana Rios Maldonado, and if you recall, she told Vanity Fair, obviously there was going to be push and backlash, but the question is from whom? Who are these people that feel so threatened or disgusted by the idea that an elf is black or Latino or Asian, trying to use that question to imply that anyone criticizing the show is racist, and that's exactly what Earl does, because he writes, I wondered about this myself. Who really are these self-appointed gatekeepers of Tolkien's works? And what conceit leads them to believe they possess this automatic authority? Maybe it's because they're actually people who read Tolkien's work and want an adaptation to stay true to what he wrote. It's not that hard to figure out. But for Earl, it appears to be that way. In a moment of sheer stupidity, Earl then claims that the depictions that Tolkien wrote in his books don't matter, but what really matters is readers' imagination of what the characters look like, as if that imagination wouldn't be based off how Tolkien described them. Again, I'm not making this up. This is what he wrote. For Tolkien's writings have been translated in numerous languages and read by people of vastly different cultures and backgrounds. And surely their imaginations of the characters and stories are informed and influenced by their background, upbringing, culture, and surroundings. No, they're influenced by what Tolkien wrote. It's not that hard to understand. As Earl continues his article, he then claims debate, discussion, and interpretation has always been welcomed at theonering.net. He calls it torn. It is what has kept us going for 2 decades. But racism, bigotry, and intolerance simply have no place in our discourse. This is why I am now calling for Earl to quit theonering.net, because he is clearly showing intolerance by calling people who have different opinions than him racists. He should not be writing for that website if he actually believes in what he is saying here, because he is being abundantly intolerant. Nevertheless, this is also clearly a lie, given Earl spent the entire article accusing people of racism for criticizing casting decisions and characterizations of characters that do not align with Tolkien's work. You can't have debate or discussion with anyone who just screeches racism at you. But here's the real kicker. Earl writes, so to all those Tolkien fans out there who may be feeling sidelined, belittled, marginalized, or discriminated against for various reasons, not just your race, please know that Torn is your haven. He adds, our staffers are committed to working round the clock, covering most time zones on all our platforms to ensure you can feel not just safe, but also empowered to join us and others on this new journey back to Arda. Another lie. Earl just spent his entire article sidelining, belittling, marginalizing, and discriminating against the Lord of the Rings fans simply because they have a vastly different opinion from him on the Lord of the Rings of Power. The website is clearly not a haven for anyone because it appears based on Earl's piece, you will be labeled a racist if you don't agree with their opinions about the Lord of the Rings of Power. And it clearly isn't safe from insane rants from people like Earl yelling racist around every corner. Finally, Earl concludes his article with another ironic comment. He writes, and to the folks at Amazon, we will of course be objectively critical of the show, but we fully support your casting choices, and we can't wait to see how this ensemble cast you've assembled will bring our beloved characters and then some to life. How is that objectively critical when you just blanket support their casting choices? And that shows where the OneRing.net's true position as an outlet is. They are a shill website for a corporate entity that will not be objectively critical of the show when they can't even be critical of casting decisions that don't align with Tolkien's work. Instead, they will do the bidding of Amazon and call you a racist in order to try and marginalize, belittle, sideline, and discriminate against you. Those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you think. My name is John Trent, and you've been watching Bounding into Comics.